There is a place where people who live there don't keep score, where there's no such thing as an enemy, where tomorrow is just another day, and the moment at hand matters most. A place where people live for more than applause. Welcome to the city. So we've been in this series that we're calling The City now for almost a month, and we've been looking at what did Jesus mean when he called us a city on a hill. That is a very interesting metaphor to express who his people were, right? And what's so cool about that metaphor is Jesus wasn't just trying to show us and tell us what we are, he was also telling us how we are. Because after he says you're a city on a hill, shining out this light and being salt to the earth to bring out the flavor of the world, he begins to kind of explain, here's what it looks like if you live in that city. If you're a true follower of mine, if you really want to get this to what I'm really trying to teach you, then this is what this looks like. It's not what you expect. It's not the things that you do on a very regular basis that maybe make you feel like I'm a good Christian. It's these other things more below the surface, way more difficult. For instance, Jesus says, listen, the city on a hill, it's a place without evens. This is a place where we're not worried about keeping score and making sure that I get as much as you get and that it's all fair, right? We've kind of learned that when we follow Jesus, that's not supposed to be our primary mode of operation. Jesus also said that the city on a hill is a place without enemies. And we don't get rid of enemies because we defeat them or we argue them into the ground. We get rid of enemies because we love them as if they were already our neighbor, right? We look at outsiders as insiders. We don't wait for things to get all warm and cozy. We just start there. We don't have enemies because everybody is our neighbor and we love everybody. Now, where Jesus is going to go today is one that's really, really difficult for me. And all the way through this series so far, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm kind of nodding along. Like, that sounds good, that sounds fair. Now I get to this place and Jesus drops a gospel grenade in my lap that I don't quite know what to do with, because what Jesus says today is that the city on a hill is a place without pretense. That's hard for me. It's hard for me to think about what does it mean to be a Christian if my Christianity is not about showing everybody I'm a Christian. How are we supposed to do that? Think about the definition of pretense. It's not a word I use regularly, but if you look it up in the dictionary, this is what you'll find. Pretense is an attempt to make something that is not the case appear true. I don't know if you've ever done this with your Christian faith, where you've tried to make sure everybody thought you were a really good, well put together, holy Christian. But in other moments of your life, you felt like you fell short of the reputation that you were putting out there. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I sure have. I grew up in the church, and so it's very easy for me to slip into, I want to make sure everybody knows that I love Jesus, so I'm never going to miss church. And I'm going to read my Bible every day, and I'm going to put something on social media about what I read in my Bible so that everybody knows I read my Bible. And I'm going to show up to 3 different Bible studies, and I'm going to be super involved because I need everybody to think that I've got this all put together, but when the door is closed, I don't feel like I've got it all together. Now, it's not the only area in my life where I'm kind of being pretentious and trying to make somebody believe something that's not true. The place where this is most prevalent in my life is on the golf course. I am a terrible golfer. Like, you can't even call me a golfer. I'm so bad. But when I'm invited to go golfing, I like to hang out with my friends, so I go, and my sole purpose in going is to look like a golfer. Because I can't actually play, but if I could get somebody to believe that I knew what I was doing just by looking at me, then I feel like that's a small victory. So when I first decided I wanted to get into golf, I bought really nice golf clubs because golfers have really nice golf clubs. And if I'm carrying around a bag with nice clubs in it, they're going to think he knows what he's doing. And I don't wear khakis most of my life, but I wear khakis to the golf course because golfers wear khakis. And you got to have the cool polo shirt that's like sporty technology like with the Nike swoosh and then the cool visor. I don't wear a visor ever, but I had to have one for when I go golfing because golfers wear that. I don't own a pair of golf shoes, but I have shoes that kind of look like golf shoes, so I make sure that I wear those ones because when I walk onto the first tee box, I want everybody to go, this dude's gonna kill it. And as long as they don't pay attention to where the ball goes, I'm all right. That's pretense. That's me trying to get you to believe something's true that's not true based on how I look. And the more I think about that, the more I'm like, oh, I'm like a terrible Christ follower. Because I do it like I do golf. And I want it to look like I know what I'm doing, but most of the time, I really don't. Because what I'm wrestling with is I've gotten more concerned with looking the part than being the part. I've gotten more concerned with what everybody else thinks about my Christianity than actually being a Christian. Have you ever been there? I've gotten more concerned about what you're going to say about me and think about me than actually being who I'm supposed to be. And this gets complicated for a pastor. I'm like paid to be a Christian in front of people. And so I really struggle with, why do I do this? Why is this important to me? And more often than I want to admit, it's important to me because I think you will like me. And you will admire me. And you will think he should be a pastor because he is super duper holy. And then I come to this part of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is breaking down the city on a hill, and he starts getting in my yard a little bit and messing with my internal dialogue, and he gets in my head. So if you're going to follow along in your own Bible, we're in Matthew chapter 6. We've been in chapter 5 for the last few weeks. We're going to jump into chapter 6. We're going to start at verse 1 with these words straight from Jesus' mouth. He says, "Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven." You see, here's what's so difficult about worshiping someone that made you. They know how you tick. And Jesus knows that there's this part of us as human beings that are very, very concerned with this idea, being admired. We all want to be admired. We want people to prop us up. We want people to pat us on the back. We want people to clap and say, "You are great. You are awesome." And Jesus knew that because that's wired into us, that it would seep into our Christianity. And he said, listen, you need to be very careful. When he says watch out, he's meaning be very careful, be very conscious of why you're doing the things you do. Isn't it interesting that he doesn't focus so much on the what you do? He's getting underneath that and behind that. Why are you doing those things? That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about your motivation. Now, Jesus knew, right? He made us, so he knew that there was this chemical in our brain called dopamine. He knew this. He invented it. He put it in there. And he knew that dopamine was a highly addictive substance. In fact, our brain reacts to dopamine the same way a brain would react to a drug. It's addictive. We want more and more of it. So when we do something and someone tells us that we did a good job with that something, the dopamine fires off in our brain, and we go, oh, we like that. And what's crazy is we like that right now, and we want more of it later. So what we do is we begin to do things on a very regular basis that give us a dopamine hit. And we feel good, and we're not conscious of it. You don't know that this is floating around up there, but it's very, very real. And so we start to shape our lives around situations that will give us the dopamine hit we're so starved for. And if we can get it every hour on the hour, we will do whatever it takes to do it. And so instead of doing things genuinely or honestly, we're just doing the thing that's going to get the clap, because that gives us what we actually want. Now, here's what's so cool, not cool, scary. really, about us as humans. We create things to feed our addictions. And there's no greater invention in all of the world to feed our addiction to dopamine than Facebook. Now, we giggle, but Sean Parker, who helped Mark Zuckerberg start Facebook, admitted to the fact that part of what they did when they were launching this thing called social media, they studied people's brain chemistry. And they came across this chemical called dopamine, and they knew that if someone shared a picture and then a friend or a family member clicked the like button, that thumbs up is like dopamine hit. And if you can get 35 of those, dopamine, 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 and you are feeling really good, and if someone shares your post, it's like a double shot. And this is why we are not addicted to social media. We are addicted to the chemical in our brain that fires off when our social media gets attention. It makes us feel good. We feel admired. There's a neuro-somethingist whose name I can't remember right now, but he came up with a term for what social media actually is. He calls it the magic maybe. The magic maybe. Maybe someone clicked the heart. Maybe someone commented. Maybe I'm going to get a little hit of what makes me feel so good today. And he says our brains actually become dependent on these kinds of things. And what's so crazy, and I don't mean to diminish someone that's recovering from a chemical dependency, but in a small way, all of us are in recovery from a chemical dependency. It's not the same, so I don't mean to make anybody feel like I'm diminishing anything, but it's true. All of us have this thing in our head that we are constantly trying to feed. And Jesus knew that. I love when modern science meets up with what Jesus said, and we start to go, wow, Jesus was not dumb. Jesus knew that there was this thing in us, and he said, be careful, it's highly addictive, and once you get on it, it's hard to get off of it, so you need to be very cautious about your motivations for what you do in my name. Because you might say in one breath, in Jesus' name, and then in the other breath you're going, and kind of mine too. I want to make sure everybody knows that. So what he does next is he starts to give us some examples about how this plays out. Not out in our work world, in our church world, in our Christian world. And I'm going to tell you straight up, this is going to get uncomfortable. Because what he starts to tap into is some of the things that we hold most dear as Christ followers. This is what he says in verse 2. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. He says, give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. Jesus over and over again is going to draw this hard line distinction between public Christianity and private Christianity. And what you're going to see very quickly is that what he cares about most is your private Christianity. What you do when the door is closed and no one is looking. Because what you do when the door is closed and no one is looking reveals your true motivations, the why behind what you're doing. And so he says, listen, when you give, whether it's to your church or to a nonprofit or to some charitable organization or to your neighbor, do it in such a way, he uses this extreme language, do it in such a way that your right hand and your left hand don't know what the other person is doing. And in my head, because I'm a child in my head, I'm trying to imagine how that looks. Like, how do you block the hands so that they don't know? But what Jesus is doing is he's using really extreme language because he knows that you and I have a very difficult time getting our motivations in check. So he knows he can't just tell you, hey, get straight on why you do stuff. He focuses on the what along the way. And he says, listen, do this what in a very specific way so that you are not tempted. Do it in a specific way so that you prevent yourself from jumping into these motivations that feed this side of you that's not just about you, but it actually distracts attention from me. And the whole reason I made you the city on a hill was to draw attention to me. I can only look at one thing at a time. This is why when my wife and I go out to lunch or to dinner and we're in a place where they have TVs everywhere, I have to sit where I can't see a TV because she will know. I can only look at one thing at a time. And so Jesus says, you need to be very careful with how you do things because you are either going to draw attention to me or to you. And this part of you that's there in everyone is going to naturally draw it to you because it makes you feel good. And so he uses these metaphors that I love. He uses a trumpet. And a trumpet, I don't know if you've ever been in a room where a trumpet is being played, but it will make your ears bleed. Not because it's not pretty, but because it is loud. A trumpet is really, really loud. It calls attention to whatever it was meant to call attention to without fail. And so Jesus says, listen, I don't want you to be people that get on the street corner and blow your trumpet, toot your own horn. See all these cool little sayings we say? I think they all come from the Bible. Don't toot your own horn. Don't get out on the street corner and blow your trumpet to go, look at how holy and great I am. Aren't I a great Christian? Because we're no different than the Pharisees. If you remember when Jesus was sitting in the temple and the Pharisees were like dropping their money in the bucket as loud as they could so that everybody would go, wow, are they generous? Wow, they're just so spiritual. And Jesus says, no, that's not who my followers are. My followers are okay if no one ever knows. My followers do their good deeds in secret. Now, I like the idea of thinking about this in terms of pockets, but it's got to be the secret pocket, like the one inside your coat, because I was thinking, this is how I would work. All right, if I got to do my good deeds in pockets like in secret, I'm just going to wear cargo shorts, and I'm going to cram all my good deeds in there so I've got these big things sticking out, and people go, man, what's in your cargo shorts? And now I get to tell them, but I get to say it's because you asked. This is how we work. So it's got to be the secret pocket where nobody's going to know it's there. Because it's not meant to be known for them. You don't do this for them. At least we're not supposed to do this for them. We're supposed to do this for him. Now, Jesus uses this word reward. You can either get your reward now or you can get your reward later. And that word that he uses is more similar to our word for receipt or proof of purchase. Now, in a few months, I think it gets closer every day, it's going to be shopping time again for Christmas. And you know what that's like. You check out and they ask you, do you want a gift receipt? Now, gift receipt is so that when you're walking out of Walmart, that sweet person sitting at the door doesn't have to stop you. You can just hold it up and say, look what I did. I paid for this. And then if you get home and it's broken or it doesn't fit or whoever doesn't like it, you can bring it back and get credit. And you and I'll just say me, I want credit. I want proof that I'm a good Christian. I want everybody to know that I love Jesus with all my heart, not because I want them to love Jesus, but because I want them to love me. And so the question that I am grappling with every single day these days is this. Am I willing, or maybe are we willing, to live without this? Are we willing to live in such a way that it doesn't matter that we don't get credit for being a good Christian? Are we willing to live in such a way that if no one ever patted us on the back or praised us online or did any of that, would we still do what we do? Would we give if no one knew we gave? Because what Jesus calls his citizens to is to say something along these lines. We choose his well done over their admiration. We choose his well done, which, granted, comes later. That's the economy, the eternal economy of the city. The well done comes later. You got to sacrifice some applause right now. Or you can get it now and it might be diminished later. So Jesus says, make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons. And then he goes on and he gets a little bit more intimate, because not all of us worry about giving, but a lot of us spend time praying. And this is what he says. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and in the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they will ever get. But when you pray, go away by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father in private. Then your Father, who sees everything, will reward you. When you pray, don't babble on and on as the Gentiles do. They think their prayers are answered merely by repeating their words again and again. He says, don't be like them. For your Father knows exactly what you need even before you ask him. I think what Jesus just said is, listen, when you talk to me, you don't have to say the magic words. There is no formula to this. And it's so hard because you come to church and you hear people pray and it sounds really fancy and really spiritual and you struggle with, like, I can't pray like that. Isn't it interesting that Jesus says this, and then 9 out of 10 environments that you find yourself in the church, someone wants to pray out loud. Jesus says, don't pray for everybody else to see, but then the church comes along and goes, well, we're going to pray out loud, and you're kind of not a good Christian if you're not willing to do that. I know you've heard that message in one way or the other. So what does it mean when we become more focused on the words that we're saying than we are on the person we're supposed to be saying them to? It looks a little something like this. This is Michael Jr., and he is one of my favorite comedians. Check this out.
I remember going to church as an adult, right, for the first time when I started going to church, and I would walk in, and the pastor was like, he said, I want you to pray with your neighbor. And I'm like, well, my neighbor don't go to this church. I don't know if you want me to call my neighbor on the phone? That's creepy. I ain't going to do that. Right, then they explained to me, right, your neighbor is a person sitting next to you. Listen, I'm brand new at this Christian stuff. I didn't even know you're supposed to pray out loud, let alone with this lady. I don't even know this lady. What am I supposed to pray about? Lord, help these bumps go down on this lady's face. I don't know what to pray about. I don't know what I'm supposed to pray about, right? She went first. She was praying all good, and she must have been John the Baptist's little sister or something. Praying. She was like, Dear Heavenly Father, you said in your word in the 6th chapter, the third verse of the book of Matthew, the 601st word on page 1248. Lord, you said, but seek, S is in search, E is in everywhere, E is in excellent, K is in kingdom. You're the Alpha, Nisi, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha. I'm thinking, man, she even know his nicknames. Now it's my turn to pray, right? But I don't got the spiritual vocabulary to just, but I'm not going to let her out-pray me. So I'm like, okay, God, first of all, you are good people. You know, you are good, Lord. You are good. You are good to the last drop, Lord. Because, Lord, I just got to obey my thirst, Lord. You know, because choosy moms choose Jesus. So, Lord, because, you know, as the rocket's red glare, Lord, it gave proof to the night, Lord. I believe I can fly, amen.
So I'd like you to get together with your neighbor. We're going to pray out loud for the next. Isn't that true, though? I mean, I've been in situations where somebody's like, wow, that was a powerful prayer. And then it's like, what is this about? And I'm in this situation a lot. I'm a pastor. So whenever it's like, hey, who's going to pray for the meal? Well, the pastor's here, so that's a lot of pressure. I feel like I've got to really live up to the hype of like power praying. And I get like that. I'm not thinking about Jesus. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about what you think about my words. And all of a sudden, instead of a conversation between me and God, I'm giving you a presentation of what I think a good Christian prays like. You see, the hard part about us is that sometimes prayer becomes more about the pleasure of the people listening than it is about God. And Jesus gets this. He says, listen, a lot of you are going to be tempted to stand on the street corners or stand in front of the church and pray and wow everybody with your spirituality. And he goes, here's what I want you to do. Go lock yourself in your room and pray there. And I wonder if part of what he's getting at is because you don't really pray unless there's no one else there to listen. You aren't honest and genuine because you're thinking about what everybody else is thinking about you. And so the question for us to deal with this morning in this regard is this one. Would you still pray like that? Would you still pray that way if no one was listening? Really ask yourself that. I struggle with this a lot. Like, when I pray, I don't know that I pray in the same way that I do when I'm standing right here and we'll pray in 10 minutes. Because most of the time when I'm praying, there's nobody else there except Jesus. And so how do I justify those things? And Jesus, again, he's not really digging on what you do. He's not really getting at how you pray, what's the right room, the right time, the right chair, none of that. Why? I want to talk about why. What is your motivation when you pray? Because my followers will choose my well done over their admiration. They will choose my well done that comes down the road for the things that no one ever saw them do in this world. But my Father, he is going to reward them, and it is going to be amazing, but you just might have to wait. And Jesus gives one more example that for me, I don't do a lot of because I really like food. But there are other places in my life where I've claimed to fast, and the message behind what he says right here applies to them all. This is what he says. And when you fast, don't make it obvious, as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled so people will admire them for their fasting. I love this. He says, I tell you the truth, that's the only reward they'll ever get, but when you fast, comb your hair, wash your face, then no one will notice that you are fasting except your Father, who knows what you do in private. And your Father, who sees everything, will reward you. I have been out to lunch where someone's like, what are you getting? I'm like, actually, I'm not getting anything. I'm fasting. You know, I told them that, right? So they go, wow, no wonder you're a pastor. We do it, don't we? We do things like this all the time. This word hypocrite that Jesus has used several times now actually comes from the performing arts world, and it has to do with actors and actresses who would wear masks. And they would get up in front of an audience and they would put on a mask. Why? So that you would believe something is true that is not true. They're putting on a show so that you get caught up in this story, and there doesn't have to be any reality to it. Because it's just a mask. You see, what we've done is we've cheapened the word hypocrite to mean you don't practice what you preach. And Jesus is like, no, it's even worse than that. Being a hypocrite is when you're doing anything that's just not really true, when you're doing anything for the show and the applause and the admiration of other people. That is not who you are. That is not who I want you to be. Jesus does not believe in what I'm going to call passive-aggressive piety. I'm going to be very pious, very out loud, so that you know how humble and meek and mild I am. This does not make any sense. Now, here's where I've done this. And if you've done this, we need to change this. This is what I'll say. I have gotten on social media and announced my fast from social media. Hey, before I do this really holy thing so I can focus more on God instead of focusing more on what you ate for dinner, I'm just going to proclaim to the world how holy and righteous I am so that you know about my fast and you miss me a lot while I'm not here. And all of a sudden, this is about like dopamine, like dopamine, like dopamine. This is my pastor, dopamine. This is not about Jesus. And Jesus says, listen, if you are going to be a citizen of this city, this is not about you. You are the unhideable, shineable place, bringing out the God colors and the God flavors in the world, not the Josh colors and the Josh flavors in the world. So stop it. Stop taking my light. Stop taking my flavor. This is not about you. Don't you be that actor that gets up in front with your mask on about how holy and righteous and all this stuff you are. If they knew the real you, because this is just not about us. And so I have to come back to would you, if no one ever knew? If no one ever knew that I gave, would I be okay with that? If no one ever knew that I prayed, would I be okay with that? If no one ever knew that I ever fasted, would I be okay with that? Am I more concerned about their admiration than his well done? Because I might be on the outside looking in as far as what Jesus says, this is what it looks like to follow me. Citizens of the kingdom say, we choose his well done over their admiration. Now, how Jesus wraps this part of his sermon up is one of the most taken out of context verses in all of the scripture. What I'm about to read to you, you've probably heard before, and I'm going to make a bold prediction. You probably heard it out of some pastor's mouth trying to get you to give money to the church. And I want to apologize on behalf of the church for taking this passage out of context because I believe the treasures that Jesus is about to talk about have nothing to do, or at least not exclusively to do, with our possessions and money. This is what he says. Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Where your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. I am going to submit to you today that when Jesus talks about treasures, he's talking about the admiration and affection and applause that you and I seek. And the treasure that we store up here on earth is all of these things that we do so that someone will think we are wonderful. So that at least someone will think that we're okay as a Christian. But I'm coming to the place where I'm going, am I okay with if no one ever knows that I'm a Christian, not because I'm ashamed of my faith, but because I'm just being like Jesus? And this safe is full of your applause, your affirming emails, your likes on social media. I got a big bank here on earth. And what it reveals is what I value most. Isn't it interesting that he says where your treasure is, that's going to show where your heart is. And the things that you seek show what your motivations are. And instead he says, store up treasures in heaven. And that comes on the heels of him saying, the Father will reward you for what you do in private. That is the treasure in heaven. Because here's reality, friends. Someone's going to come along and out-holy you. They're going to pray 10 minutes longer than you did. They're going to fast off of more things than you did. They're going to give more than you did. They're going to have perfect attendance at church one year. They're going to out-holy you, and they're going to steal your glory. They're going to steal your treasure. And over time, the reputation that you and I work so hard to build up in each other's minds about how great a Christian we are, time will eat away at that. And the moths will turn it to rust. So Jesus says, listen, if you want a treasure that lasts, you will find it in the quiet places of your life. Because my Father will reward, he sees and will reward what you do in private. So the question is, what do you value most? Their applause, their admiration, or his well done? I'm struggling with, am I willing to be a Christian when the lights are off? Because I'm supposed to choose his well done over their admiration. This is what I'm going to invite you to struggle with this week. What if you were the last person on earth? You're the only one. Like the zombie apocalypse came and everybody's gone. You're the only one. What kind of Christian are you now? There's no one there to tell you that was a powerful prayer. There's no one there to like your scripture reference on Facebook. There's no one there to greet you at the door and say, wow, you never miss a Sunday. There's no one there to make you feel good about being a Christian. Are you still a Christian? Are you still doing it? I ask myself, would I get up and preach this sermon if there was nobody else in the room because it's truth? Or am I doing this because there's people in the room and they will say, great sermon, man? I have to dig down to my true motives, and how I'm getting there is with a simple question. Why do I? Why do I fill in the blank? And you can put anything in that blank. Ask yourself, why do I go to church? Why do I read my Bible? Why do I pray? And I know what your knee-jerk reaction is going to be. Well, it's because of Jesus. That's what we say in church. Jesus is the right answer to all the questions, right? It's Jesus. And I say that too. But then I've got to dig another level down. Well, why do I love Jesus? You know what my answer is sometimes? Because he makes me feel good. And that's selfish. That's not about him. That's about me. I have to really get to my honest motives. I can't leave it at because that's what a Christian does or that's what a churchgoer does or whatever. Because Jesus, he's not focused on what? He's focused on why. He wants to know why you do those things in his name. So if the lights are off and you're the only person in the room, are you still praying the way you pray? Are you still worshiping the way you worship? Are you still doing those things? If the answer is I'm not sure or no, it's time for a motivation check. It's time to ask ourselves, why do I really do this? And I'm trying to get more and more to the place in my life where I can honestly say, I do this for him. I do this because he is who he said he is. And okay if no one else sees it. If no one else knows it. So this is what we're going to do to end our time together. This will be a little different. We are not going to collect an offering today. We're not going to send the ushers up because we don't want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing, at least for one morning of our lives. So in the back, there are baskets where you can leave your check or your cash if that's how you give. So you can still do that today, but you can do it discreetly as you walk by and no one will know. You don't have to worry today about if you give online and someone sees that you didn't put anything in the bucket. You don't have to look in the bucket and go, wow, I gave more than that. We're just not going to do it. Here's the other thing we're going to do. We're going to turn off every light in the room. And we're going to worship together. But there will be no band for you to watch and adore and applaud. This worship will be just you and Jesus. The lights will be low enough that the person behind you will not know if you don't stand when everybody else stands. It'll be dark enough where if you raise your hands, no one will be the wiser. You can worship how you want to worship because for at least a few minutes, it's not about the pretense. It's not about looking like we know how to play golf. It's about truly, genuinely interacting with Jesus. And so I want to pray, and I want to pray for our time because It would be easy for this to become just as much a show and a distraction as anything else. And we don't want that. That's not our desire. Our desire is to give you 5 minutes where the lights are off, the audience is gone. It's just you and him, the way that he wants you most. Let's pray. Jesus, for the next few minutes, my prayer is that you would be present in ways that we maybe have not experienced. That you would truly make us feel that it's just you and me, you and us in this room. Lord, we're not doing this so that we can post a cool social media post. We're not doing this so that people think our service was powerful. God, we're doing this because we genuinely love you and we want to follow you, not for what we can get out of it, but because you are who you are. And so meet us here in this place. Thank you for being our one true living God and Savior.